What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. Alright, so I had a subscriber of mine ask me a question. They asked me, why are the Knicks considered a historic franchise? And the person that asked this is a 76ers fan. And he, I guess he's looking at like the fact that, hey, the Knicks only have 2 championships. And Philly, has 3. Now, I know some of you will be like, well, they only have 2, right? No, they got 3 because they won in 1983, 1967, and then, of course, when they were the Syracuse Nationals, which I believe was 1955, I think, they won their other championship. So they have 3 championships. So why isn't a franchise like Philly seen as a historic franchise like the Knicks? Well, there's a couple of reasons why this is the case. Number one, along with the Boston Celtics, the New York Knicks are one of the original franchises. They're one of the 11 original teams that started the whole league back in 1946-47 when it was the BAA, the Basketball Association of America, and the NBL, the National Basketball League. Now, both leagues combined in 1949 became the NBA, but from 1946 onward is considered the NBA. So from that perspective, it's historic because it's one of the first franchises, along with the Boston Celtics, one of the 2 oldest, Boston and the New York Knicks. Then you have to remember the sheer size of the New York market as far as fans are concerned. And then you especially have to put it back toward then in the 40s and 50s into the 60s before the westward expansion of basketball. Basketball was completely dominated on not just the East Coast, but primarily the Northeast and maybe into the Midwest. And if you look at all of those markets, New York was, off the top of my head, I would guess maybe more than 60% of the entire market at one point. Boston being a large one, but you had smaller teams, Rochester and Chicago Stags, and that wasn't really a basketball city, if I'm not mistaken, at that time. Maybe I'm wrong with that, but New York just was a dominant market, and it still is to this day. And also, it wasn't just that they had a large market. Madison Square Garden is considered the mecca of basketball. The original Madison Square Garden and the secondary one, or what have you, is considered the mecca of basketball. At least always has been. Where a lot of great basketball in itself has been played, and a lot of great individual performances. It's the center of basketball. It's just where if you can't play in the New York pressure, then you're not a superstar. Michael Jordan loved playing in New York. He loved playing in Madison Square Garden. And when you think about it, some of the great performances have occurred either at Madison Square Garden or against the Knicks. Who did Will score 100 points against? The Knicks. Who did Kobe score 61 against? The Knicks. Who did Mike score 55 against, and 50 and 51 against, and then 54 in the playoffs? The Knicks. So many great performances have occurred against New York, just from a historical standpoint. Who did Luka get his 60-20-10 game against? The Knicks. Who did Pete Maravich get his career high against? 68. The Knicks. Rip Hamilton's career high of 51 came against who? The Knicks. So, that's part of the lore. And, the first few years of the NBA, the Knicks were a good team. I think they went to the finals in 1951, 52, and 1953, although they didn't win a championship. So they're one of the most competitive teams in the first 10 years of the NBA. But then afterwards, from the late 50s throughout the 1960s, they were not a really great team. They had some good players there, Richie Guerin being one of them, but they were not a great team until the rise of, say, Willis Reed, Walt Frazier, Bill Bradley, Dave DeBusschere, Red Holtzman as the head coach. Then that particular team won a championship in 1970. We all remember, or at least those of us who know about our history, the Willis Reed game in 1970. I think it was Game 7. And then, of course, they won another championship in 1973. They went to the finals in 1972, but lost to the Lakers. I think it was 4-1. But then they won, like I said, their second championship in 1973. And they were a really good team for much of the 1970s. But from the late 70s into much of the 1980s, they were a mediocre team. Bernard King was a great individual player, but they weren't much of a team. Went to the playoffs a couple times, but they weren't a great team. But during the Patrick Ewing era, which started the draft lottery in 85, all the way into the 2000s, the Knicks were one of the better teams in the NBA, especially from the early 90s onward. They went to a championship series in 1994, and then again in 1999 they went back to the finals. And they were a top team for a couple of years. Sort of fell off for many, many years, but now they're back. And it's very important, in my opinion, for the health of the NBA, for the Knicks to be contenders. Because it just doesn't seem right. I mean, it's just, from a historical standpoint, the Knicks have almost always been at least contenders. So, the fact that the Knicks went to the playoffs this year, at least they made it to the second round this time, that's encouraging if you're a Knicks fan. What else do you want to look at when it comes to the Knicks and their history? I guess you want to look at maybe the Hall of Fame players that have played there. Let's see if I can get a good look at that. Well, first let's look at the retired numbers. Walt Frazier, Dick Barnett, Earl Monroe, Dick McGuire, Willis Reed, Dave DeBusschere, Bill Bradley, Patrick Ewing, and Coach Red Holtzman have all had their numbers retired. And as far as Hall of Famers that have played with the New York Knicks, you have Tom Gola, Slater Martin, Bill Bradley, Walt Frazier, Harry Gallatin, Walt Bellamy, Patrick Ewing, Bernard King, Spencer Haywood, Tracy McGrady, Jason Kidd, Paul Westphal, Jerry Lucas, Willis Reed, Dave DeBusschere, Earl the Pearl Monroe, Dick McGuire, Bob McAdoo, Richie Guerin, Nathaniel Clifton, Dikembe Mutombo, Maurice Cheeks, and Carl Braun. These are all players who are in the Hall of Fame that have not had their jerseys retired with the New York Knicks. As far as great head coaches are concerned, head coaches that have coached the Knicks that are in the Hall of Fame, Red Holtzman, of course. Larry Brown has coached with the Knicks. Don Nelson coached with the Knicks. Lenny Wilkins, Pat Riley, Rick Pitino, although he's in the Hall of Fame as a college basketball coach, but also the great Hubie Brown coached in the mid-1980s. He is also in the Hall of Fame as a coach. As far as future Hall of Famers that have played with the Knicks, I think we'll all agree that Carmelo Anthony will be on that list very, very soon. And as far as All-Star Game selections that have played for the Knicks, All-Star Games, got to start off with Boyerla, I believe that's his name, Harry Gallatin, Dick McGuire, Max Zaslowski, Carl Braun, Nathaniel Clifton, Richie Guerin, Willie Knowles, Ken Sears, Johnny Green, Tom Gola, Lynn Chappell, Willis Reed, Dick Barnett, Dave DeBuscher, Walt Frazier, Bill Bradley, Earl Monroe, Bob McAdoo, Bill Cartwright, Michael Ray Richardson, Bernard King, Pat Ewing, Mark Jackson, Charles Oakley, John Starks, Allen Houston, Latrell Sprewell, David Lee, Amari Stoudemire, Carmelo Anthony, Tyson Chandler, Kristaps Porzingis, and Julius Randle. And like I said, man, when you look at all the great players, man, it's amazing. The all-time leading scorer is Patrick Ewing, 23,665 points. Most minutes played, Patrick Ewing, 37,586. Most rebounds, Pat Ewing, 10,759. Most assists, Walt Clyde Frazier, 4,791. Most steals, Patrick Ewing, 1,061. Most block shots, you guessed it, Pat Ewing, 2,758. And these are some of the reasons, not every reason, but these are some of the reasons why the New York Knicks are considered a historic franchise. And, when you look at, the celebrity crowd that they draw, the drawing power, Madison Avenue, it's just very desirous from a economic standpoint for the New York Knicks to be a great team. So, anyway, that's all I got to say in this particular video. Tell me what you guys think.